Hi, this is going to be a training video for end users to explain how you can sign into and use Cherwell Service Management. Assuming this is one of the first times that you've seen or worked with the product, we're going to go over signing into the tool, which you can do by double-clicking on the Cherwell Service Management icon on your desktop. If you haven't installed Cherwell yet, you either need to get the auto deploy utility or the link to the auto deploy utility to download and install it, or if you have it available in SCCM or your software center, you need to install it from there. If you don't have either of those, reach out to your Cherwell administrator or your help desk. But if you have Cherwell installed, you can sign in by clicking on the little blue icon for Cherwell Service Management, and you should get this connection prompt. Before we go any further, if you see an orange icon for Cherwell Administrator, just get rid of it. If you're an end user, you're not an administrator, you'll never need this Cherwell Administrator icon. If you go to install Cherwell Service Management and it asks you if you want to install the administrator, you can, you don't need to, and you shouldn't. If you try signing into it, it'll just say you don't have access to the Cherwell Administrator tool. So if you're just an end user, you don't need that one. But if you try opening it up, you'll get a similar login prompt, which is going to be this one, which says connect to Cherwell Service Management. You'll have your version number. On this screen, you may have one or more connections. These are lists of information for different servers that you can connect to. Depending on how your environment's set up, you either have one connection straight to your production server. If you're one of the early adopters of your Cherwell Service Management program at your company, you probably have a dev environment and a production environment, or a dev test production, whichever combination of the three, or you just have production or dev, depending on what's available. You should know which one you're going to be signing into. If you're early into the implementation stage of your Cherwell project at your company, you probably only have a dev environment, or you probably only have a production environment. So you pick that one. Usually you're going to be signing into production. On my system, I just have a bunch of different connections. Basically, these are links to different Cherwell servers. So if you have multiple different instances of Cherwell or different servers with different content or for different purposes, these allow you to select which instance of the Cherwell database or the Cherwell application you're signing into, because these are actually all different databases. The icons mean something specific. As an end user, you should only be seeing this one right here. That's this little PC icon and database icon. Administrators will usually see an icon like this, which means that this is a direct to database connection. Now, if this is already pre-configured, then that's great. But a direct to database connection signs into a specific database directly using SQL Server authentication instead of using Cherwell's application server. End users typically don't get this, so you'll see something like this, where the configuration for it typically will just send in the IP address or server URL for a Cherwell server. You don't need to know very much about that, but if you don't have any connections in your All Users or PC tab, you need to add a connection. Now, if you have administrator rights, you can add a connection to All Users by clicking the Add button. If you don't have administrator rights on your computer, or if you haven't run this application as an administrator, you'll get an error. You can add a connection to your user tab. My username on this computer is just PC. By clicking the Add button while that tab's open. You're going to configure this by selecting Connect to a Cherwell server. You'll get the server URL from either your Cherwell administrator or someone else who has it. You'll type it in here. If you're on version 8.3 and below, I believe usually if your application server is set up as an actual application server instead of IIS, this starts off as TCP. Otherwise, it's HTTP or HTTPS. The link that you get should include that. Otherwise, reach out to your Cherwell administrator and find out which one's which, because it's important. But you'll type out the address of your Cherwell server. You don't need to include anything after that. You give it a name. You should know whether this one is your dev or your production environment. Most of you end users, it's going to be production. You click Next. You're going to want to test your connection to make sure it works. If you get any kind of error message, you've got a problem, reach out to your Cherwell administrator. But if you've already got your connection and you're able to, and you're ready to sign in, you can either double click on it, you can select it, click OK, you can check this box that says automatically use connection without asking, and then click OK. What that box does exactly what it says. The next time you open Cherwell, it'll skip straight to this part right here where it's loading the information it needs to bring you to the sign-in page. If you check that box that says automatically sign in without asking, it will literally never ask you for a connection to choose again. And if you need to go back, the way to do that, if I can close this, my machine doesn't have very much memory. So the way to undo that checkbox is to hold down your left shift key. Oh no. Is to hold down your left shift key and double click on your Cherwell Service Management icon. That should open up your login screen. And I can see here it didn't work because I had other things highlighted. Hang on a moment. We're just going to close that. So we're going to find Trebuchet app, and we're just going to force close that guy because that's nice and quick. Okay, so you're going to highlight Cherwell Service Management. You're going to hold down left shift. You're going to double click on it. And I would keep left shift held down, and then you see your connection prompt to come back again. That's the only way, aside from going into the registry editor, that's the only way to undo this checkbox. So if you check this box, you better mean it. After that, and I'm just going to uncheck that. After that, you're going to select your connection. And once you do that, it should prompt you, well, it may or may not prompt you to select a role. A role within Cherwell is basically going to be, actually I got ahead of myself, it's going to prompt you to sign in. So this is going to be your sign-in page. Nice big blue orb. If you're on Cherwell version 9.4 or above, you're going to see an environment button or an environment piece of text right here. If this says production, your connection should be labeled something like prod. If this says dev, your connection should have been labeled something like dev. This was added in version 9.4. I think it was added to address some issues with users signing into the wrong connections, because this becomes visible on your login screen now as well as in some other areas of the tool. But anyways, you're going to take your user ID and your password and you're going to sign in. This will very likely be your Active Directory Windows authentication, or the username and password that you use to get into your email, onto your Windows laptop if you have one, things like that. There's also an option for an internal Cherwell username and password, and you'll enter that in exactly the same way. If you are on an Active Directory connected system and for some reason you have a Cherwell authentication instead of Active Directory, you'll type in a domain of Cherwell. Otherwise, you have some options. So go ahead and try signing in using your user ID and password like you do normally. If that doesn't work, you might have to enter in a domain name like this. Now, the differentiation here is that in single domain networks, you can choose to have Cherwell automatically default your domain to where if you don't enter a domain name, it will assume the default one. If you're in an Active Directory domain that has multiple different domain names, and they're all those different domains are signing into Cherwell, you will very likely end up having to type in your domain name to sign in. But if the domain is defaulted, you don't have to. You can sign in with just your username and password. Again, there is a prompt or a checkbox there for for automatically saving that username and password each time, so you don't have to enter it in. Again, if you do that and you need to sign out and use another user account, the way that you have to do that is to hold your left shift key while you're signing in. And if you didn't think it would take us 10 minutes to get through signing in to Cherwell, you were wrong. So there's also a role screen. Now, you might see this the first time you sign in. Again, there's a checkbox for always use selected one, which is why it didn't show up on mine. But this is going to show up on your screen between when you sign in with your user credentials and when that other page with the dashboard popped up. This might have multiple different options. If your administrator has configured it to where you only have one role, you won't see this. But if you do get a pop-up saying choose role, pick the one that most closely applies to what you're going to be doing. Now, to explain what roles do, they're not super important, so if you can't find one that matches, it's not the end of the world. But the purpose of roles within Cherwell is to define what default dashboard you see. Now, a dashboard is basically going to be a home page. It has a list of different widgets, and this allows the administrator to say, hey, the service desk should see this page when they sign in. It'll have these widgets, and it'll be laid out so that they can accomplish their work most efficiently. When you get into other modules of Cherwell, like change management and problem management, there's other dashboards with information about change management records and problem records. And the most efficient way of getting users into those dashboards, if that's their primary job focus or primary role, is to select that role when they sign in, rather than here's my home page for incident management. I need to switch to a change management dashboard. I need to go to my dashboards menu and then navigate this page. When you're a new user, the easiest way is to select the correct role. If you don't have many roles or if they don't apply to you, you can ignore that part. But ideally, on a mature system, you should have different roles, and they'll configure what your default dashboard is. They'll also possibly limit what you see in your quick search here and in other areas of the tool to make the system more efficient for you and more purpose-driven to what you're going to be doing or what your actual role is. Haha, pun. But again, they're not super important, but they will drive things like what shows up in this drop-down and what your default dashboard is. All right, so you're signed in and you're on a dashboard. That's what this colorful screen in the middle is. So everything that's not this weird light gray / white color around it, like this whole box here, everything around these scroll bars, is a dashboard. Now this can be customized by you personally. You can create a dashboard as a user. Under most systems, users have the rights to create their own dashboards. So once you're familiar with the tool, you should look into, can I create a copy of this dashboard and add some of my own widgets? Teams can have team-specific dashboards if they need to. And then administrators can create dashboards that are visible to everyone, like this one. We'll go over that in a minute. Basically, this is not static. This can be changed over time if you need certain information to appear here. So as an end user, if you're using Cherwell later on and you see something that you would like on this screen, tell your administrator about it, because they can very likely change this dashboard to accommodate something if you need it. Anyways, onto an explanation of what the heck this is. So this dashboard here is a customizable page that loads information from your Cherwell database. Every one of these numbers here is called a widget, and this is a configurable component of the dashboard that can pull in data from other parts of the system. So you'll notice I double-clicked on that widget and it gave me this list. This is a list of incidents. Now, there's two different ways to view this list, and something that's really, really important for you. If you don't like this view, or if you know someone that has this view and doesn't like it, there's another view, and it should be the default view, and it's not. You go to the View menu and you select Results in Grid, and you'll get this much, much more efficient, awesome view instead, where you have columns, and you'll actually have grouping. You can drag columns up to this Group By bar here, and it'll do this nifty thing where it groups by all the different possible values and shows you counts. So if you're opening up a list of records here, you want to go to the View menu and make sure that Results in Grid is ticked there. Anyways, so what I just did there, from the dashboard, I saw a widget for a number for something that was important to me, the number of incidents and requests in our system. I double-clicked on it, and it opened up that list of tickets. Now, on your dashboard, you are very likely going to have a series of widgets. They'll either be numbers, which are called gauge widgets in Cherwell, that gauge a specific count of something, or there'll be a list of records, and I don't have an example of that on my screen, but you'll very likely see a combination of these little numeric widgets and maybe a list of tickets that's embedded on this dashboard. And you can get to any one of those tickets by either double-clicking on one of these numbers here to bring up the list of incidents that's behind it. Your administrator might configure this widget right here to open a separate dashboard when you click on it, but that's not nearly as common. You can also have charts. If you want to double-click on one of the chart points, you'll get to the list of incidents that's behind that as well. But basically, a dashboard is a navigational tool for you to find the work that you need to be working on. So the administrator ideally is going to lay out information on your dashboard in the order that he wants you to look at it, or he or she wants you to look at it. So for instance, the very first really important metric on my dashboard is open incidents. This is something I'm going to check 10 times a day because I want to see the open tickets that I have. Open requests is the same thing as open incidents, but within Cherwell, it follows the ITIL framework, and there's a difference between incidents and requests. An incident, if you hear people refer to this, is an outage or something that's broken. A request, I'm just going to go over terminology, is someone requesting something, asking for something like, hey, can I get this service? Can I get a license key for this software? Something like that. An incident here, if you see this distinction, is I can't sign into my email, something's broken, server's down, yada, yada, yada. But that's all a dashboard is. It's a way to lay out the work that you have and show other useful information, either charts. Dashboards are very useful for reporting on your day-to-day activities, even though there are separate formal reports. And they allow you to very quickly navigate to different groups of records within the tool. Before I go any further, you might hear me interchange the word ticket with incident and request. I'm going to ask you, and your Cherwell administrator is going to ask you, not to use the word ticket. If you end up using Cherwell for incidents as well as change requests and problems, the word ticket is going to become a problem, and that's not an intentional pun. Basically, the issue you're going to run into is an incident, if you click New Incident here, has a unique ID, and when you start off with Cherwell, people are going to call that a ticket number. Well, later on, if you create change management records for managing changes to your infrastructure or you track problems, they'll also have a 5 or 6 digit ID, and you're going to want to call that a ticket number. Best practice, don't call this a ticket number. This is an incident ID or a service request number, something like that. But try to refrain from ticket number, because if you can say this 5-digit number is for an incident, it will make finding it a lot easier. Okay, so this is a dashboard. If you have other dashboards that you need access to, you can get to them by going to this dashboards menu at the top of the screen. There are a couple of different options here. Most of them you either don't have access to or you don't need to look at. The important ones are going to be Dashboard Manager. This allows you to navigate and find other dashboards in your Cherwell system. Most of the default ones you're going to look at are going to be under the Global folder, Dashboards folder, Default Dashboards, and you can see different dashboards in your system. You can open them by double-clicking on them. Now you have a home page. This is an example of one of those lists of different records that you can embed on the dashboard. By the way, I didn't have one of those earlier. You can go back to your home page using this little home button right here. You do have a home dashboard. Usually this is set by your role, but you as a user can change your specific homepage. So if you go to another dashboard, like our change dashboard, and you want to set that as your default, you can do that by right-clicking on that dashboard at any point in time and selecting Set X Dashboard as default. This right here is going to be the name of the dashboard, and that's it. If you have rights to edit this dashboard, you'll have an edit button. We're not going to cover that in this video, but that's basically all you need to know about dashboards, is that they're meant to allow you to see the work that you should be working on. You can get to any one of these, any one of the lists of records that these numbers represent by double-clicking them, and there are many dashboards that you can navigate between using the dashboard manager. And if you don't know where the dashboard you're looking for is stored, but you know the name, there is a search functionality. So moving on, and I mentioned search, which is going to be the next thing we're going to talk about. There are multiple ways to search for records within Cherwell. There is a quick search in your task pane, and this is the one that you're going to use probably more than any other search option within Cherwell. Basically, this lets you pick a business object. If you're an end user working with tickets or incidents, you're going to select incident here. And this, you can type in any information that would be present on that incident that you want to search for. So if someone says, I can't sign into Outlook, and you want to find tickets related to Outlook, you can type in the word Outlook, and it'll search every field on that ticket more or less for that word, or that series of words, or any combination of what you put in there. This is what's known as full text search. Several of the fields on our incident object here are indexed, and all of the different words are separated out into an index so that you can execute one of these full text searches. That's a technical jargon term. It's just a database term that references how this information is looked up from the database. But it's important to know this is a full text search, and you can put in any information. It doesn't have to match exactly. There could be commas in between words, and it'll still find it. And more importantly, you can use wildcards. Oh, I'm wrong. Well, I'll just edit that out. Anyways, so there's a lot you can do with this little section right here that might not be noticeable right away. This little ellipsis right here lets you control when the search, or when the records you're searching for were changed. This gets saved, by the way. So if you ever say, I want to search for something that was changed today, it'll like permanently alter how this works to where the next time you search, it'll search for things that were changed or last modified today until you change that. Sort by is always going to say, until you change it, it'll always say sort by relevance. This is really going to sort by usually your public ID or your ticket ID or your incident ID, whatever you want to call that. There's also a checkbox that says search within existing results. This is really useful for if you want to execute one search and then narrow it down additionally by adding keywords to it by searching here again and checking this box. And there are some other buttons over here that are kind of important. This button right here says search should include children. This will search any related records to an incident as well when you execute this search. So if it's not in the description of the ticket, there might be a journal or an email note, and it can search that. There's also an option to search attachments. So this is a very simple incident search that you can use. There's a checkbox here that says open only, or you might see open incidents only. This checkbox is important. Basically, a incident or service request within Cherwell goes through a life cycle. It moves from new to in progress to resolved to closed. You'll see that status up at the top left on this form here for incidents. And once this reaches resolved, 3 business days later, it moves into a closed status and it's permanently closed. Well, if it's closed, it's not open. And if this checkbox says open only and you search for something, closed tickets won't show up. That probably sounds like common sense the way I'm explaining it, but it's easy to disregard this checkbox when you're trying to find something important. So when you're searching here, I generally always uncheck open only. I'll look through a long list of tickets. I don't care. There's also an option for an advanced editor. Before we get to that, we're going to talk about the form that we have for incidents before we go into really powerful searches. So this right here is an incident form. This shows us all of the information for one specific incident or an issue that someone's reported. So you can get to this form. If you look at a list of incidents, you can get to this form by double-clicking one of them, and you should see it pop up. You can also get to this by submitting a new incident, and you'll get a blank one. Basically, this form is going to show you. Hang on. I want to put someone here before I. Okay. This form is going to show you basic information about a support request. At the top left, you have a public identifier, which is going to be incident, and then a 6-digit number in my case. In yours, it might be a 5-digit number. It might have a prefixed letter on it, but this is going to be a public ID. And when I say public ID, I mean this is a value that you should be able to search for very easily that uniquely identifies this record. So if you tell someone your incident ID is 102084, and they send that back to someone else later on, they'll find this ticket very easily. We'll go over how else you can find someone's tickets as well. But on this screen, one of the very first fields you're going to see is description. You might also usually have a short description field here. In my system, we've removed that, but you'll have a description field, which is a large, infinite size field that you can put in all of the details about an issue in. If somebody is calling you, you're going to be typing in what the issue they're experiencing is in the description field. That's why this says record the details. If you have a short description field above it, you include a short summary, almost like a topic or a title. So you might say, Outlook's not working, Outlook's broken. And then in description, you would say, Outlook's broken, I can't get my emails, I can't sign in, I've tried doing these troubleshooting steps, it's not working. And then you'd move on to the other parts of this ticket. So you have a call source field. This is generally going to be phone if you personally are submitting tickets. If you receive an email into the system, it'll always show up as email. And if you have a self-service portal, call source will say portal. This is an easy way to distinguish which method was used to create a ticket. This is actually something you'll rely on later on as you try to find out how a ticket was created. Towards the bottom of the screen here, we have step 2, which says classify, and you have a service and a category and a subcategory field. Now these are used to categorize a ticket, to say that's mostly for reporting purposes, and it's also for routing. So this is going to say we have an issue with maybe email and calendaring, that's a service, and under email and calendaring we can say we have a problem with our desktop client for email. There's an option under here that says request access, maybe somebody doesn't have it installed, or if you don't have that, generally you'll have a category that says submit incident. This is usually a catch-all, but you can use that on there. And basically, this service category and subcategory is going to derive which team is assigned this incident once you save it or once you escalate it. So there's functionality on the back end of Cherwell that's going to decide who's the first team that works on this type of issue, and then if they escalate it, using this escalate to level 2 button, who's the second team that's going to work on this issue. So it's extremely important when you work on tickets, you should be classifying them using these service category and subcategory fields. They drive a lot of functionality in the tool, and if you're not sure which category to use, go ahead and ask somebody, maybe ask your Cherwell administrator, and if something feels like it should be added, let your Cherwell admin know. After that, you can pick out a priority. This is going to give you a matrix based on impact and urgency. And if you don't understand what those are for, basically impact is going to mean how many people are affected. Is this a single individual that's having an issue, or is the entire company experiencing an outage? And also, how urgent is this? So is it very important for that individual? Is it very important for that department? If it's not, you pick high or you pick low. If it's not very important, if it's very important, you pick high. And these two are going to drive priority between a lowest possible answer where a single user is affected by something and it's not very urgent for them of 5, all the way up to it affects everybody and it's extremely important. That's a 1. So higher numbers are lower priority. Lower numbers, like 1, are higher priority. Now, you might see a major incident within Cherwell. All you need to know about this, if you're not creating them, is a major incident affects multiple people. It's usually a company-wide outage or a department-wide outage. Major incidents can be linked together. So if you have an issue that's affecting many people, you're going to end up creating a major incident or linking an existing incident to a major incident. If you don't have a major incident, you'll be using this button right here that says link to existing major incident to link it to it. Basically what that's going to do is that allows your Cherwell system to close all related tickets at once. So let's say Outlook goes down, nobody can receive emails company-wide, the service desk creates a major incident, 200 tickets get created. Well, as those tickets are created, they get linked to the major incident. And so then once the issue is fixed, the service desk finds that one major incident, they'll have a widget for it on their dashboard, they close that major incident, and then all 200 tickets get resolved at once. It reduces the amount of time it takes to work on those tickets within your system. At the bottom end of the screen, you have a Step 3 section that says Investigate the Incident. This is a custom form that's going to change based on your Step 2 area. So this is called a specifics form, and it shows specific additional details based on the type of issue that's being supported. So if you pick email, this might show troubleshooting steps and important questions related to email issues. If you're submitting a certain type of request, like a mobile device request, that specific form is going to say, here's the list of information that we need from you in order to process this request. And if you have a self-service portal, they'll see that form too. So if you receive a ticket that comes through the portal, it'll generally have information filled out on that form. That's basically our incident form. It shows a lot of different information about the request. It's all going to be shown on this main area over here on the right. On the left, you have the status. Priority is shown on a banner because it's kind of important. This allows you to prioritize your work and see very urgent issues versus very low priority issues. Next, you have a requester. I should have gone over this earlier because it's one of the first things that should get filled out on an incident is who's reporting the issue, who's requesting software, who is this support request really about. You can fill this in by entering someone's, either by entering their full name. So if I type in Henry Bryce and hit enter, oh, I don't have searching working on my computer. Never mind. Generally, if you put in someone's full name and you hit enter, it'll just load their information. If you put in part of their name, it will actually create a search for that user. But if they're already selected, then it does nothing. If you put in part of their name, it'll search for them. If it finds only one result, then it will automatically select it. So you notice I put in the word Michael, and it selected Michael King. If we put in Henry, it can't find Henry for some reason. Oh, it's because it's Henry with an I. If we put in the word Henry, you'll get a search result, and you can see Henry Bryce. So generally, you can put in part of someone's name. You can put in their entire name. But basically, that's how you select a requester. There's a button here for entering additional contact information. It may or may not show up on your system, but this is usually an extra field for a phone number, another way to reach this user. Underneath this section, you have an owned by field. This is going to be really important for you because you need to be able to see on an existing incident or service request who owns that ticket and where it is. So the first field here is going to be a name of an individual. And so in this case, Andrew Sims, he owns this ticket. Underneath that name is a team name. So ownership or assignment within Cherwell works in two different distinct ways. A team can own a ticket, and a user or an individual can own a ticket, or both. So when a ticket is assigned to a team, but not a user, it's in that team's queue. They'll see it on their dashboard under a widget that says, My Team's Open Tickets, and they'll assign tickets that don't have a user to those users, either automatically through a round-robin process, or the team manager will assign tickets to a user, or the individual users will pull them out of a queue. Once it has a user's name on it, that user owns this ticket and they personally are working on this ticket. If you reassign it to someone else or you escalate this ticket, you're generally changing the team. If you're escalating it to another team and you don't know who's going to pick it up, you change the team name to the team that you're escalating to by clicking on that team name that currently owns it, first level support. So first level support has it right now. If I want to change this to the second level support team, I click on that little button there. I pick second level support, and you'll see what happens here is this owned by section is going to change, and now we see select owner second level support. Select owner means there is no individual selected for this ticket, only a team. Now at this point, if you know who needs to receive this ticket, you can click on select owner and you can pick that user. Otherwise, members of that team will individually monitor the tickets that are assigned to their team's queue without an owner, and they'll pull tickets and take ownership of them on their own. Now, if you need to take ownership of a ticket, you can either use these buttons here to change the owner and the team, or you can click the Take Ownership button down here. Now you'll notice when you're the owner of a ticket, usually your team will show up here. I don't have a team on my test environment. And then where you would normally see the name of a user, you usually see the word you. And if you have a picture in Active Directory, that'll show up here as well. Underneath that, you'll have SLA. Not all companies use SLAs, but this is basically going to be a list of deadlines for when you should respond to a ticket and take ownership of it and start working on it, and also when it should be resolved by. This one's going to be pretty straightforward. It can change based on the priority and the service, but generally you just need to know when these deadlines are if your organization is using SLAs. That should be a simple description of what you need to know to work on an incident. There's also an option to submit to the knowledge base, but we'll go over that at some other time. Now let's talk about some handy ways to actually look at a requester's tickets. So if you get a phone call and someone says, hey, I already had an incident, here's the incident ID number, let's say 102084. You can either paste that incident ID in this search incident box over on the left, 102084, you click OK, or you hit enter, and it'll search for that ticket. If it finds only one result, it pops it open. Otherwise, if there's multiple matching entries, like if they had other tickets and they mentioned this one in it, you'll see a list of search results like this that'll populate all the different tickets that match. The other way to look at someone's tickets is through their customer page or their requester page or their employee page. Those are three different words that mean the same thing. Basically, within Cherwell, you have a customer record. Generally, this is going to be anyone within your Active Directory system or anyone that's expected to submit a ticket will have a customer record. This is the list of people that you can select as a requester, by the way. So if we look at Henry's customer profile, we can see a lot of information about Henry. So there's only one Henry. It brought up his customer profile for us. So we can see his employee ID, his department. Generally, you'll have a title in here. SAM account name is shown. This is your Windows login ID, and you'll also see desk phone, mobile phone, email, and manager on here. But the important thing that you'll see on this customer record is their ticket history. So you'll see an incidents tab at the bottom of the screen, and if they don't give you the proper ticket number, or if you can't find it, or if they say, I have submitted 10 different tickets and I need help, you can see their previous tickets by opening up their customer record using the search and opening up this incidents page, and you can see the very first one there is our 102084, and you can also see this person's ticket history. Now, the other neat thing, by the way, you can pop open these incidents. There's a quick view button, which is these little binoculars here. So you can get a quick view of that incident. It'll pop it open in a little window. You can then close that out. You can also use this little arrow button to go back to that record from that tab, the currently selected record. Now, the other way to look at Henry's open incidents is to click the little arrow button next to Requester. So if you can see these little icons, they'll look different if you're on Windows 8 or Windows 10 or Windows 7 with arrow on. One of them is a little database search icon, and the other one is an arrow icon. If you click the arrow icon to the right, it's actually going to open up Henry's employee record or customer record. This is the same as what we looked at earlier, but you can get to it directly from the incident screen. So the most popular use case for this is going to be you get a phone call, you click new ticket, you're filling it out, and Henry says, oh, I already have an open ticket. Well, you want to go reference that open ticket, so you open up his customer profile, you open up his incidents tab, and you see, oh, he's already got 3 tickets open for this issue. I don't need to submit this one. I can go open that ticket up. Or maybe I can just give him a status update for that ticket, and I don't have to save this one. On that note, saving tickets is something that you'll have to do. After you fill out all of the information on an incident or service request, and you've handed it off to another team, or you've ended your phone call because you need to gather more information, once you're done filling out this incident, generally you're going to see a little blue save icon up at the top of the screen. It's going to be right here. You have to get into the habit of clicking this save icon. If you try leaving the record without clicking that save icon, like you try going home, you'll get a pop-up that asks you if you really want to save changes. And it has one of these checkboxes that says, don't show this again. Well, if you check that little don't show this again, it remembers this answer, and if you click yes, then it will always try to save the record when you leave. But if you have a required field and you need to cancel creating a ticket, it'll never let you leave. And at the same time, if you check this don't show this message again box and you click no, then it'll never save tickets when you leave, and you might lose data. So don't ever check this don't show this message box again unless you're absolutely certain. And when you're done working on a ticket, always save it. Always, every time. So that's filling out an incident, more or less. You've saved your incident, you're done working on it. Something else that you may need to know how to work with is locking records. So when you're making changes to an incident, up at the top of the screen, it'll say this incident is locked by you. If you ever see this button, it'll either say locked by you or locked by and then someone's username. This means someone's editing this record, and this prevents 2 people from working on a ticket at the same time. So if you have a ticket that's locked, you can click that little locked by you button and it'll unlock it, and other people can edit that record. Once you've saved your ticket, if you are going to work on that ticket and go through different statuses, where it says status assigned, if you want to move it to in progress, you can click next begin work. This will also generally take ownership of that ticket if you're not the owner. Once you're finished with an incident or service request, once that issue is resolved, you can click the resolve button here, and it'll ask you for close notes or a close description. This is what you did to actually resolve that issue and provide that service to that user. We'll say Outlook is no longer broken. It started working again on its own. After that, you might have a prompt for a cause code. This is something that your service desk management is going to use for reporting the type of issues that are coming into the service desk. Once this is done, the status moves into a resolved state. Now, I mentioned earlier the workflow for incidents is going to start out in new. It might move into an assigned status. Eventually, it moves into in progress, which means somebody's working on it, and then it moves into resolved. After it's resolved, generally you have a period of time to add any additional notes. You have an option to reopen this incident, and this requester has an option to reopen the incident as well if that issue is still occurring. Now, you have a time limit for that. It's 3 business days on most Cherwell systems. It could vary for your system, so you should ask, but usually it's about 3 business days. Now, the other thing that's happening while this ticket is being worked on, once the ticket is first created, an email notification goes out to that user letting them know, hey, an incident has been created under your name, and it'll have all of the details of that incident. Although not in my system because emails are broken in my system, so you'll have to take my word for it. But an email notification goes out to them when the ticket's created, and also when it's resolved. So what you put in there for the close notes, that gets sent out to that user word for word. So close notes should be user-friendly, absolutely every time. If you need to look back at what your close notes were, they'll show up in a tab here for resolution details. If you need to take personal internal notes that should not be visible to the user, you have a Journals tab for this. This Journals tab should show you audit history for this record. So if you make changes to fields like the owner or the priority, that'll get logged under this Journals tab. But you can also add notes. A note can be anything you want to add here that's not visible to the user but is visible to other technicians. And this is the easiest way to pass a note on to other people that might work this ticket, even if you don't know who's going to be working it. So email notifications will automatically show up under this Journals tab here. So you'll be able to look at emails that are sent or received if they respond to the ticket. And then also you can leave notes for other people that work on it. Now, if you want someone else to see this note, you should uncheck this box that says mark as read. Generally, this changes the icon. On systems that I work on, usually this is going to show a red exclamation mark, but out of the box, it shows this little unread envelope icon. The mark as read functionality generally means it hasn't been read by the intended user, and so it should show up under their dashboard. There's actually widgets that'll show, my tickets with unread journals, and ideally when somebody gets this and they acknowledge it, they'll mark it as read. So you can add all your notes about this journal here, and then you can save the ticket, and it's attached to that ticket permanently. Administrators can delete journals. Users generally can't delete journals or tickets or anything else. After 3 business days, the incident is going to move from resolved into a closed status. So once it's resolved, add any final notes you have about what you did to resolve the ticket if they're not in the resolution details. And then after that, the ticket will automatically move itself into a permanent closed status. Let me think if there's anything else. There are tasks under incidents. You can use these to break up your ticket into multiple different individual tasks. They have a very similar workflow as incidents, so we're not going to cover them in depth here, but you can assign a task to a person. When you assign a ticket or a task to somebody, they receive an email notification with details about it. And if you need to email somebody from an incident while you're working on it, you can do so by clicking on their email address here, and it should pop open a follow-up email. This is going to be an email template with some basic information about this ticket, and you can add information to it and preview it before it goes out. So just click in here anywhere that you want to add in text, and then you can send out that email once it's ready. So this should be pre-formatted with, hey, Henry, regarding your incident, here's your ticket number, which was logged at this date and time. We have a question or an update. Here's where I'm going to paste that question or update. Here's the subject line up here. Here's the recipient. Here's the from address. That's all there is to it. So you would click send, and that email would get sent out. Generally, it's this checkbox here for attached to current incident history will always be checked. and you may or may not have rights to uncheck that depending on your security permissions. But once this email is sent, it would generally get attached to the journals section at the bottom of the screen and would become a part of that incident or service request. Now that, I kind of rambled on here and I went around in circles, but that is generally going to be your getting started, the basic list of things that you're going to need to know for working on a ticket. Once you've worked on a few of these, you might have questions about how to find previous tickets. You can do that using advanced searches or custom searches or quick searches. You can do that either by using the advanced editor, which is this button right here. You can also get to that advanced editor using the searching menu and clicking Quick Search Builder. The Quick Search Builder here, oh, by the way, you're almost always going to be searching for incidents, so set search type up here to incident. The Quick Search Builder here is a very powerful search builder, and the format that you use here is going to be similar to SQL. If you've ever used structured query language to query a database, you don't have to have any background on that to use this. It's actually a lot more user-friendly than it looks. So the way that this works is you have a list of comparisons or other clauses that define which records are going to be returned in a search. A comparison clause is the one you'll use most often, and for this one you're basically selecting a field and you're giving it a value to filter the list of tickets in the database. So typically if I picked call source and I want to show all phone tickets in my database, all I have to do is select call source on this dropdown and select phone, click OK, and we get every phone ticket in the database. If you have multiple criteria, hang on. Also, if you create a search and you want to update it and tinker with it, you can go to the searching menu and select Edit Current Search, and you'll get those criteria back. If you have multiple different criteria, you just click this New button and you get another option. So you can say call source is phone, status is a field there. You might say I don't want closed tickets, so status is not equal to closed, and call source is phone. Here's a list of all of your open phone tickets. Now you'll notice some of these are resolved. There's two different statuses. One is resolved, one is closed. So you might have to say status is not equal to closed and status is not equal to resolved to only get open tickets. Now there are a couple of other options for searching. One of them is you can have and between each of these comparisons. You can also have or. To do that, you go up to the top and you select the radio button that says at least one of the items in the group must be true instead of all of the items in the group must be true. In this case, you'll get tickets where either the status is not equal to closed, so it's open, or the status is equal, or the call source is phone. That example doesn't make a ton of sense, but you might look for, phone tickets or emails and filter out portal, things like that. You also have the option of breaking this up into little subgroups. So if you have many different conditions and you need some of them to be true all of the time, and then another subgroup that's one or the other when you're doing search criteria, you can accomplish that using a group clause. You select group clause, you'll get a little button here that says all of the following are true, which is very similar to the one that shows up at the very top. You configure this exactly the same. You select either all of the items in the group must be true or at least one of the items in the group must be true. And this toggles your statements from being, item 1 and item 2, or item 1 or item 2. So that's going to define how these different search criteria are evaluated. Now, what I've been showing you so far, where we have these little left and right fields here, these are called comparison clauses because you're comparing one field value to another. Now, when you're doing comparison clauses, there's a lot of different list items here. Generally, you'll only ever work with this first one. If you're looking at incidents when you're searching, it's going to be the very top one. It'll say incident fields. These other items in this list, they're relationships to other tables. Generally, you can't always search on these, especially if they're relationships that have many records instead of one-to-one relationships. Administrators might be able to make some use out of these other items in this list, but as an end user, you're almost always looking for a field under incident. If you need to search for something that's in a journal or in a task, there is a way to do that. You go to this new menu, you hit the little arrow next to it, and you select Related Clause. This lets you pick a relationship like incident links customer or incident owns journals, and you say there's at least one journal, and then you define your criteria like there's at least one journal that was created by Henry. Well, then we know we have a list of incidents that were touched by Henry. And I say touched by because Henry created a journal, and journals are either going to hold personal notes or audit history like changing fields. So that's a really easy way to bring up a list of tickets where someone's modifying a ticket or creating journals. The search builder is really going to become your friend when you get to a point where you have to bring up reports if you're in management. Also, once you're working on searches, you can limit only open tickets or closed tickets if you want. You can search within existing search results, and you can also filter when a ticket was changed. Up at the top, you have the option of sorting by different fields and changing whether they're sorted in ascending or descending order. Once you have a search that's built out the way that you like, you can actually save it and reuse it. So if you click the searching menu and select Save Current Search As, you can give that search a name, leave scope as user. Scope is basically, it's really important. You'll see these scopes within the tool, within dashboards and Search Manager and other areas. But basically, scope is user level is something that you can create and that you can see personally. Role level is going to be anything for your role. Team level scopes are things that are available only for your team, and then global is something that everybody can see. You usually only have permissions to add stuff to your user scope or your user folder, so leave that the way it is. And then if you click OK, this search actually gets saved under that name, and the next time you go to your searching menu, you'll see that name under this list. And if you open the Search Manager, you can see a list of saved searches, of which in the out-of-the-box installation of Cherwell, there are hundreds of global ones. You're going to be looking at your user folder or your user scope folder, and you'll see your new saved search there, and you can run it from there. Now, once you've created a stored search, or if later on you create a dashboard, you can also pin it to your taskbar on the left, or your task pane, by right-clicking it, hovering over Add To, and selecting Task Pane. And then you'll see it under your common tasks here. I haven't really gone over common tasks. Usually you'll see a list of items here with either links to dashboards or other pages you might need to use. These are going to vary quite a bit depending on your installation of Cherwell and how your environment uses Cherwell. But aside from that, you should be able to ask your Cherwell administrator any specific questions you have on how your processes work or how your system's been customized, because almost anything you see within this tool can actually be customized by the administrator. There are a lot of technical limitations as to how far you can go with customizations. For example, we can't do marquee text across the top of the screen, but we can add email notifications that go out to you or the requester of a ticket at various points and complicated workflows. But this should be everything more or less in a nutshell that you need to know in order to get started submitting incidents within Cherwell using this new menu and clicking New Incident, filling out an incident by filling out all the fields, navigating your existing open incidents, and doing some basic searching. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. We might expand out on this little tutorial later on, and thanks for watching.